Welcome to the introduction video for Brian Bender's iSwiss student case file. My name is Katie and I'm going to take you on a brief tour into one of the demo student case files that were created to demonstrate features of Tier 3 progress monitoring and the iSwiss application. While Brian is a fictitious student, I want to reinforce the message that a student is the driving force behind a student support team and the electronic case file that houses his data. Brian is a creative and thoughtful student in the 8th grade. He makes friends easily and likes working with his hands or on the computer. Brian has a history of needing extra supports for behavior and some academic subjects as well. Most recently, the focus has been on disrespectful behaviors, such as using a raised voice or inappropriate language, and they're occurring, on average, 2 to 5 times weekly. Brian also struggles to complete and return his assignments. When Brian's behavior escalates, his teachers have been removing him from the classroom, decreasing his instructional time. Here is Brian's behavior pathway, based on the most recent Functional Behavior Assessment, or FBA. During core academic routines, when given a behavioral or academic correction by an adult, Brian engages in work refusal, disrespect, and use of inappropriate language in order to avoid difficult tasks or gain teacher help. Now let's look at the competing behavior pathway. The expected or desired behavior in this routine and context is to listen to the instructions and corrections calmly and choose appropriate times to ask for help respectfully. This will result in good grades and positive attention from peers and adults. The Student Support Team, or SST, has agreed that Brian needs some alternative strategies to more quickly access help or request an alternative or modified assignment. Here are the supports that Brian's SST has identified. To prevent the problem, the special education teacher will review lessons across the 3 subjects and support modifications if needed to align with Brian's skill level. Brian will check in each morning with his preferred staff member, Joe. Teachers have agreed to prompt Brian in advance when there is a new or difficult material coming up. Teaching. Brian has participated in the Tier 2 intervention, check-in, check-out, so he's already familiar with this routine. But he needs an individualized card to better match his specific goals. Teachers will prompt Brian to use this and other routines. Joel will slowly teach new routines such as asking for help, negotiating an alternative assignment, asking for a break, and finding one-on-one support when he is not in class, such as during study hall or after school. Response. When Brian meets his daily goals, he will be able to choose from a menu of reward options that are meaningful to him. The team hopes to eventually fade this back to weekly. Staff will ignore low levels of problem behavior, but have a correction routine ready, if needed, to review Brian's options, the rewards for meeting his goal, and/or the consequences of not meeting his goal. Let's move to Brian's iSwiss student case file. I'm going to log in to the Swiss Demo School by clicking on App Demos, the Swiss Check-in, Check-out Swiss and iSwiss Demo. And once logged in, I'm going to open the iSwiss application and locate Brian Bender's name. Sometimes I need to move this column over. So here's Brian Bender. I'm going to click on Open. Now I can glean lots of information right here on the dashboard. For example, I can see when Brian's case file was originally created and the current implementation status. The implementation status field represents the overall patterns of plan fidelity by the staff and Brian's outcomes or progress toward goals that we set as his SST. At the bottom right, I can see all the SST members who are involved in the planning, monitoring, and implementing of his plan. Notice the SST members have various roles on the team, and most do not have direct access to iSwiss. Reports are sent out regularly to the team, so only individuals who regularly enter data or create reports need direct access. At the bottom left are the electronic documents that we as a team regularly refer to or update. At the top right, we see that there are three distinct pieces of data we collect to monitor Brian's supports. iSWIS requires that every student case file include a measure of fidelity to track whether the plan is being implemented, and at least one outcome measure to track whether the student is responding to the plan. Let's find out a little more about how these measures work for us as an SST. We'll start by opening the data entry page. Each measure is set up with a data collection schedule so that iSWIS knows when to expect data for each individual measure. Depending on the day, you might have one or more measures scheduled to be collected. I can use the calendar tool or these arrows to find scheduled data collection dates for each measure. Notice that each measure is structured just a little bit differently. Some measures have multiple rows. These are called segments. This means that our data have been divided into different sections that are all connected to the main idea of replacement strategies in this case. Some measures require that I type in one or more number, while others require that I check a box or radio button. So notice that there are several drop-down boxes called status. When we choose status, we are basically saying we didn't collect data and here's why. So we can leave it at present and enter our data, or we can say the student was absent or there was no school, for example. All right, so let's go ahead and move to view reports and see a little bit more about how these measures work. Don't want to save my data. Let's open a segment report for one of the measures that uses segments to divide up the data. I'm going to choose Brian's assignments. So I'll choose Brian's assignments and I'll pick a date range when I know we collected data. So 1/18. Okay, so I chose a week of data for Brian's assignments. I can see an average score for each segment during the date range I requested, along with the number of days when we collected data and the total number of scheduled days or possible days when data could have been collected. Usually the SST assigns one person to be the data analyst. A data analyst is the person who monitors the data and sends out updates to the rest of the team on some sort of schedule, usually weekly. This allows the SST to stay informed between meetings and be ready to make decisions during meetings or if an unexpected problem arises in between meetings. Additionally, sharing data regularly allows the team to check their data against their own perceptions or observations. For example, data might be inaccurate because someone misunderstood the criteria, or data might not have been designed to capture specific details that have become important to monitor. The team can make choices when looking at their data. They can choose to make changes to the measure, changes to the criteria they've used, or to retrain data collectors on the original protocol. Let's look at one more report. Go back home. This time I'm going to look at a measure report. And again, I will choose one of my measures. This time I will pick fidelity. And again, I will choose a date range that I want to look at. So, 18. All right, so now this report is going to show me the score for each day across all segments if there are any. And when this measure was set up, the coordinator of the team determined how the data were going to be collected. In this case, we use a scale of 0 to 4, and we see I believe this is an average across the different segments. So this is the average score is just below a 3. Measures have many moving parts, so the team relies heavily on the coordinator who understands the different metrics and options available in iSWIS and can set up measures that will provide useful information to the team using the options that make the most sense for the information they want to monitor. The team members assigned to collect and enter data are critical. We want the data to accurately represent fidelity and outcomes, so everyone needs to be using the same criteria. In addition to collecting the numbers, we also need to know if there are plan changes that will affect future scores, or if there was a note taken to explain why there might be a variation for a single day. Perhaps a field trip occurred, or there was a substitute teacher. We also need to know why data might be missing. Remember the status field and data entry? Well, these show up as small codes at the bottom. In this case, we don't have any, but you can see it would be an A, ND, NS, or NA, or a question mark if nothing was entered. Let's head back to the student dashboard for Brian's case file. Take a look at the top left box. We can see that this student support team has uploaded an assessment. Let me rearrange these real quick. They've uploaded an assessment and also a support plan. Now, if we want to know how recent this assessment and support plan were uploaded or updated, we could look down below. Here we can see that this student file is active. We can see when the team last entered data for fidelity and for outcomes. And again, we get to see that implementation status we talked about earlier. We're going to spend more time getting to know Brian's SST and the data they've collected, but this gives you an idea about who Brian is, how his support team has set up his case file, and some basic features of iSWIS that allow the team to stay organized as they support Brian.